The Millionaire and the Black Homeless Man. Richard's gleaming motorcycle sputtered and coughed smack in the heart of the city, right under the blinding neon lights and screeching horns. Crowds spilled out from the sidewalk, uneasily shifting as the rich man's sleek machine groaned and died. His suit, sharp and untarnished, felt like armor, melting under a flood of sweat and frustration. Hands shaking, he slammed his fist on the handlebar, cursing the silence that followed the engine's last roar. Across the street, a shadow moved. A black homeless man, ragged and breathing smoke from a battered pipe, watched Richard like a hawk. His eyes gleamed sharp and quick, scanning the millionaire's flailing attempts with a strange mix of amusement and something darker, something like pity or a warning. In a city that swallowed dreams whole, this quiet spectator was an odd sight, a ghost among the rush. Just then, a young girl ducked through the crowd, a streak of dirt and defiance wrapped in "Or!" Richard's breath caught when he noticed the bracelet on Maggie's wrist, a battered silver chain, twisted but unmistakable. It was the exact same bracelet Vivian had worn, his ex-girlfriend who vanished years ago, swallowed by silence and rumors. His pulse pounded, chest tightening as memories flooded cold. Her laugh, her last furious words, the night she disappeared without a trace. "Where did you get that?" His voice cracked like glass. Maggie looked up, startled. Her eyes, fierce and wary, didn't hide the storm beneath. "Found it," she said, voice husky, almost a whisper. "Been with me a long time." The name hit him before he could stop it. Vivian, the missing piece he'd never dared to find. And now, here she was, her echo in this tough kid who fixed broken things like miracles. The city's usual noise faded to a background growl. Richard's world cracked open. People began to gather, some curious, some judgmental. "Rich guy's got a street kid with him?" one muttered. "What's he doing? Feeding a stray?" But Maggie, with fire in her gaze, stood tall. The black homeless man from before nodded once at Richard, then vanished into the growing chaos. Nobody knew who he was or what he was protecting. Richard had no answers, no plan, only a reckless surge in his chest that screamed this was more than luck or chance. It was a reckoning. That evening, as the city lights flickered and flickered again, Richard felt the weight of every secret, every fear, every lie he thought forgotten. And Maggie was no street kid. Something deeper tied them together, something raw and unbreakable. But at what cost? His phone buzzed, a message from Letitia, his wife, cold and sharp. "Stay away from her. She's a threat." His hands trembled under the city's unforgiving glare. Richard realized his relentless quest for success was about to collide with a truth that could unravel everything. A storm was coming, and he wasn't sure he was ready. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without warning. Just take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss out on any exclusive content coming your way. And while you're there, leave that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, Which city are you watching from? I love getting to know all the amazing people who are part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact! Richard's phone buzzed again, the message from Letitia still burning in his mind. But the crowd was shifting now. The tension palpable. Maggie stood, tools in hand, her eyes darting between Richard and the street filled with strangers. Something heavy hung in the air, a confused buzz, a name like a curse on the tips of eager tongues. "Look out!" a voice shouted. Richard turned and chaos exploded. A car, dark and roaring, careened through a sea of pedestrians, tires screeching against asphalt. The black homeless man appeared again, darting like a shadow, grabbing Maggie by the sleeve and yanking her to safety, just as the car slammed to a halt, metal screaming and people screaming louder. Heart thundered. Richard froze, instincts roaring. The crowd pulsed and surged, bodies screeching to a halt or breaking into a panicked sprint. He looked at the man. What had he just seen? Was he even real? A fleeting figure launched into action, diving for Maggie, as if he knew something, as if he were guarding a treasure. Then everything slowed. The air felt thick, electric. The man's eyes, fierce and unwavering, locked onto Richard's. In that moment, a memory surged. Glimpses of Vivian, of the stories he'd pushed aside, whispers he'd buried. The man was different, but something about him flickered familiar. Maggie gasped, her face pale. What just happened? She stuttered, looking back from the man to Richard. And then it came. The explosion of sound. A gunshot shattered the night, sharp and cruel, echoing through the air like a death knell. The crowd screamed as people tumbled, confusion gripping their faces. Richard's instinct kicked in fully now. He lunged, shoving Maggie behind him, adrenaline fueling him. "Get down!" he yelled. But then a second shot rang out, and time fractured. Richard turned, eyes wide in horror, as the black man staggered back, clutching his gut, blood blossoming through his tattered shirt. The scene painted in vivid contrast, a bright city, brutal reality. Richard's breath hitched, shock dulling his senses. What the hell? The heat of panic slammed into him. The man collapsed, eyes glazed, but still holding on to something indefinable, something dangerous. But then the world shifted again. A face emerged from the fleeing crowd, familiar yet nightmarish. Letitia, her expression cold, purposeful. Richard's chest tightened. She stood with a weapon in hand, heartlessly staring down the dying man. "No!" The word tore from Richard, as if he were breaking apart. People were still running, still screaming, each shout an accusation. And then he understood. The man had known something, perhaps a secret buried deep, a connection woven with dark threads. Memories crashed into him, pushing him to the edge of comprehension. "You had to know," Letitia said, her voice steady, a chilling calm contrasting the chaos. He was a liability. Maggie's eyes flicked from Richard to Letitia, confusion breeding a new type of fear. "What?" she asked, voice trembling. Richard stood paralyzed, heart racing, thoughts whirling, an unraveling tapestry of lies and threads snapping under strain. The world around him ricocheted with urgency. Now he had to choose. Was this the past reborn in this moment? The black man gasped, blood trickling, his eyes conveying words he couldn't speak, but Richard felt heavy in his chest. Was this how it all ended? Secrets lacing love and betrayal together? And before his mind could settle into any sense of clarity, Letitia's face twisted into something unreadable. "Forget about him, Richard. You don't want to know." But it was too late. The storm had arrived. Richard's heart thundered, caught between panic and disbelief. The man lay crumpled on the asphalt, blood pooling in dark, glistening patches. The crowd around them, once a swirling mass of chaos, now felt solid. Each gasp, each murmured word, a tightening rope around his chest. Letitia stood there, weapons still raised, and her cold gaze seemed to slice through the air. "Maggie, get back!" he shouted, desperation clawing at him. But things were spiraling. The silence that followed the gunshot was thick, almost suffocating. He turned back to the man, his mind racing. This was more than a chance encounter. This man, he held the key to questions Richard had long buried. A sense of dread unfurled within him, clashing with that reckless surge of determination. "Why?" Maggie's voice cracked like the air. "Why did she shoot him?" Richard couldn't answer. He felt his breath hitch, swallowed hard, eyes darting between his wife and the man bleeding out on the pavement. "Richard!" Letitia's voice was sharp, a blade among the confusion. "You don't know him! He could be dangerous!" In that moment, the homeless man lifted his gaze, eyes flickering with a dawning realization. He opened his mouth, strangled words escaping. "You need to know the truth, Richard." The whispered urgency ignited something in Richard's gut. It felt like a punch, like a discovery that threatened to unravel everything he thought he knew. But before he could lean in closer, a second figure broke through the crowd. A woman, wild-eyed and frantic. She stumbled over to them, hands shaking. "Stop! You can't do this!" Richard recognized her instantly. It was Sarah, the private investigator he'd hired years ago to find Vivian. His stomach churned again. How could she be here now? Letitia's weapon lowered slightly, confusion crossing her face. "Who the hell is this?" Sarah gritted her teeth, desperation oozing from her. "I was following the trail. You don't understand what's happening. Richard, this man, he's connected to Vivian." The words shattered the clamoring noise around him, sending shockwaves into the night. Richard staggered back, the weight of her revelation crashing into him like a freight train. "No," he managed, disbelief tearing at his insides. "You're lying. She's gone." But Sarah pressed forward, urgency in her voice. "No, she's alive. It's been hidden." "He knows where she is." Richard's blood ran cold. Fear twisted inside him like a coiling snake. Letitia's gaze flicked between Sarah and the downed man, the layers of anger and confusion grazing her composure. A low groan escaped the man's lips, pulling Richard from his spiraling thoughts. "Help her," he gasped, voice strained but strong. "I can tell you everything." "Shut up," Letitia hissed, the weapon shifting in her hand. Fear revealing itself through clenched jaw and taut brows. "You're a dead man." In an instant, everything shifted again. A distant siren wailed, growing closer, drowning the chaos in blue and red. Richard felt the world closing in. Maggie shrank against him, eyes wide with fear, a realization dawning. "They're coming, for all of us." Then, as if summoned by panic, a group of paramedics burst into the scene. They tackled the chaos head-on, rushing to the downed man. But Richard's mind was reeling. Before he could grasp what that revelation meant, Letitia made her choice. She dropped the gun at her feet, a sudden decision etched in her features. "No more!" she shouted, breaking through the noise. The air crackled with tension as all eyes turned to her. "He's dangerous, Richard!" But Richard's heart raced for another reason. The truth was rippling in the air, like electricity. "Do you even know the truth?" he shot back, anger fueling his voice. In that moment, everything hung in balance, a storm of emotions swirling around them, secrets whispering in the wind. Richard faced not just the chaos around him, but the reality of what lay ahead. This was no longer just a fight for survival. This was a fight for truth, love, and the buried past. And as the sirens grew louder, Richard knew they were only just beginning. The storm wasn't coming, it was here. And it promised to blow apart the very fabric of everything they thought they knew. Richard felt the ground shift beneath him, the chaos morphing into something sharper, more insistent. The sirens wailed louder, a discordant cry that seemed to vibrate through the very marrow of his bones. He looked back at Letitia, fear galvanizing his resolve. She met his gaze, her expression a mix of defiance and something else, something that flickered too quickly to grasp. "Why are you doing this?" Richard's voice cracked, heavy with disbelief. Before Letitia could respond, a blinding flash erupted, a few feet away, illuminating the scene in pure white. A shockwave rippled through the crowd. People screamed, ducking and shielding their faces as smoke billowed upward, wrapping around them like a suffocating shroud. Richard's instincts kicked in. He moved to shield Maggie, pulling her closer to him. The black man on the ground gasped, pain etched into every line of his face. Ha 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 ha! But he watched with fierce intensity, knowing something Richard didn't. Then the smoke cleared to reveal a figure, someone bursting through the haze. It was a woman, tall and commanding, wearing a sleek black suit, her presence magnetic yet terrifying. At first, Richard couldn't recognize her, but then clarity hit like a punch. It was Vivian, his missing ex-girlfriend. The world around him twisted. She looked different. Years older, perhaps. A shadow of the girl he once loved, now hardened by something. "Richard!" she shouted, urgency slicing through chaos. "Get away from her!" Confusion clouded Richard's mind. "Vivian?" He barely managed to speak her name. "You're alive?" Ignoring him, she focused on Letitia, her voice laced with fury. "You don't know what he is. You've been deceived." Shock rippled through the crowd. Richard could see the judgment etched on the faces around him, the disbelief mingling with intrigue and fear. Letitia tightened her grip on the gun, confusion breaking through her cold facade. "Enough!" Letitia barked, her voice a fragile thread of control. "You shouldn't have come back." The black man on the ground struggled, his eyes shifting between the unfolding scene and Richard. "You need to listen," he rasped, urgency pushing through his pain. But Vivian stepped closer, her eyes glowing with an intensity that felt like a storm. The air thickened, tension wrapping around them like a tightrope. "You're tangled in something you can't see, Richard. She's a liar." Richard's heart raced. He wanted to step forward, to reach for Vivian, to understand. But Letitia's voice echoed louder. "What do you know?" she shot back, venom lacing her words. "You don't understand who she is. Richard, trust me." Vivian pleaded, desperation breaking through her composed exterior. In that moment, everything spiraled. The sirens weren't just the police. They'd come for secrets woven tight among them. Secrets that could rip the fabric of their lives apart. Maggie's grip tightened on Richard's waist, eyes wide with confusion and fear. And then it happened. A blast resonated through the night. The ground shook, debris flying, shadows flickering in and out of the chaos. A second explosion rolled through the street, ripping open the air with a fierce roar that drowned out every other sound. People screamed and scattered, fleeing from the growing chaos. Richard felt a surge, sensing the hollow in his chest expanding. He turned to grab Maggie's hand, but she slipped from his grasp, wading through the chaos. "No, Maggie!" he yelled, panic boiling over. Vivian's voice cut through the noise. "Get down!" she shouted, pulling him to the ground just as the aftermath blared overhead, a reflection of the storm brewing between the four of them. As the dust began to settle, a silence enveloped them, thick, palpable. A fractured moment stretched into eternity, Richard's thoughts racing, weaving through danger, betrayal, and hope. Two figures advanced from the chaos, glimmers of authority blurred against the smoke. When they stepped into the light, reality shattered again. The people he'd known, the past he thought buried, it was all coming back, entwined in the flames of the very present that threatened to devour him whole. And amid the wreckage, Richard felt the pulse of truth quickening. What twist of fate had led him here? The storm was not just outside, it lived within him. And now, everything he thought he knew might just bend and break. The storm had arrived, and it was only just beginning. The sirens blared, drowning out panic, injecting chaos deeper into the scene. Vivian stood there, eyes fierce, somehow cutting through everything. Through the smoke, through the fear. Richard's heart raced as he battled disbelief. "Vivian!" he breathed, feeling as if the world had tilted on its axis. "You're alive?" "Richard, listen to me," she shouted, a desperate urgency in her voice. "You think you know the truth? You don't. Not about me, and not about Letitia." But Letitia's presence loomed large. Sweat dripped from her brow, anger etching her features tight. "Stop lying! You're just here to manipulate him!" Richard's mind spun. This was beyond the motorcycle, beyond the financial chaos of his life. It was twisting into something darker. "Your wife's been lying to you, Richard," Vivian insisted, her gaze unwavering, like a lighthouse cutting through a storm. "She's been keeping secrets, secrets about our past." Richard's chest felt tight, the pressure mounting, as if the truth was a weight stacked too high. He glanced at Letitia, who faced Vivian with a frightening resolve. Her weapons still dropped, but her anger palpable. "You're delusional!" Letitia snapped, but even she seemed to waver, doubts creeping into her voice. "Maggie, we need to go," he urged, trying to shield her from this unraveling chaos. But Maggie's eyes were glued to Vivian. "You know her?" she managed, voice trembling. Vivian stepped closer, urgency rising. "I didn't disappear willingly. I was taken because of secrets tied to this city, to Richard." The black man on the ground groaned, blood soaking into asphalt, the life seeping from him. Richard's breath hitched. "What do you mean?" he pressed, desperate as pieces fell into place. "The police," Vivian started, but another explosion cut her off, a harsh sound that echoed like thunder. The paramedics ducked, sirens drawing even closer. A new panic gripped Richard. Then, without warning, everything changed. The homeless man, eyes locked on Vivian, reached out with a bloodied hand. "She knows," he gasped, struggle etched into every word. Richard turned, feeling an urgency he couldn't shake. "What does he mean?" he demanded, desperation pushing through. And then, without warning, the man's form convulsed as his breath hitched painfully. "I'm her father," he managed, the words tearing free like a reluctant secret breaking loose. "Vivian, you need to—" A piercing shockwave rippled through Richard, and his world spun as he realized what that meant. Vivian's eyes widened in horror, understanding crashing into her. "What?" she whispered, horror-stricken. Letitia stepped back, stunned, rage rapidly shifting into something else. Fear? Despair? The crowd was still circling them, uncertain, whispering the name father with disbelief and confusion. "No!" Vivian gasped, hands trembling as the weight of the moment bore down on her. "You can't mean—" "Yes, Vivi, it's all connected. You have to break free from this cycle." He came back, voice breaking. Richard's heart raced. Could it be true? Had everything he thought known about Vivian shattered? The pain of the man on the ground felt like a knife twisting deeper, and a crowd whispered louder, their shocked breaths filling the air. Richard felt the ground shifting beneath him again, his entire reality unraveling. "But this changes everything! Why didn't you tell me?" he shouted, frustration bleeding into anguish. Vivian dropped to her knees beside the man, tears mixing with the smoke. "I thought you were gone. I thought I had lost you forever. I didn't know." And as the paramedics rushed closer, urgency climbing to a crescendo, Richard felt the weight of those words like a punch to the gut. A truth that twisted everything into chaos. It was the storm, the aftermath flooding in, bringing with it questions he could no longer ignore. Maggie looked between them, eyes wide, voice shaking. "Does this mean—" she started, but the sound of footsteps drew attention. A shadow shifting beyond the chaos. A third figure emerged, tall, grim, with familiar features. Richard's heart dropped. "Who are you?" he demanded, feeling shattered. And just like that, the storm wasn't just coming, it was here! And the eye of it was engulfed in a truth Richard never saw coming. Richard felt the world tilt again as the man's words hung in the air like smoke. Her father? The truth was a blow to his chest, hard to breathe. Vivian dropped to her knees, her eyes wide, disbelief igniting a storm within them. "Maggie, get back!" he shouted again, his heart racing. This was beyond comprehension. Letitia stood frozen, her expression shifting into confusion, almost fear. The crowd murmured, voices rising and falling. No one knew what to believe. And then, just as the tension reached a fever pitch, a sudden commotion erupted from the edge of the crowd. A figure burst forth, shoving people aside. Richard squinted through the swirling smoke and dust, his heart pounding. The air hummed with uncertainty. It was a man, but not just any man. He was tall and imposing, clad in a long coat that flapped as he rushed forward. A distinct energy radiated from him, a dangerous mix of confidence and aggression. Richard recognized him. It was Jack, Vivian's brother, a notorious figure with connections that stretched across the city like spiderwebs. A man whose name conjured a mix of respect and dread. "What are you doing here?" Vivian shouted, her voice rising almost above the crowd, strained, raw. Panic flashed across her features. "I came to settle old scores," Jack replied, eyes darting to the bleeding man on the ground and then to Letitia. Richard felt ice run through his veins. Old scores? What kind of mess was this? He could barely grasp the reality that was unfolding. Letitia's face contorted in disbelief, struggling to keep her composure. "Jack, stay away from her," Letitia warned, her voice trembling. "You don't know what you're getting into." But as Jack moved closer, the tension shifted. Suddenly, he pivoted, spinning to face Richard with swift precision. Their eyes locked. And in that moment, Richard felt an undercurrent. Threatening, urgent. There was something deep buried in Jack's gaze. A secret pulsing like a river beneath the surface. "Richard," Jack said slowly, words dripping like poison. "You really have no idea who you're dealing with, do you?" And then came the twist, like the snap of a branch before the fall. Jack whipped out a phone, his fingers a blur. "You remember that night, don't you? The one when Vivian disappeared?" His voice was a low growl, edged with anger. Richard felt his stomach clench. The memories flooded back, sharp and relentless. "What do you mean?" he managed, breaths shallow. "Letitia orchestrated it," Jack spit out. The accusation like a gunshot, breaking through the tension. "She made sure you'd never find her." The crowd gasped, whispers rushing like wildfire. Letitia's face drained of color, eyes wide with shock, rage bubbling beneath. "You're lying!" she shouted, defiant yet trembling. "No." Richard felt the ground shift beneath him, the horrifying truth clawing its way to the surface. "You! How could you?" "Because secrets don't stay buried, Richard," Jack said, voice low but steady, eyes glimmering with a cruel spark. "And I've come back to make sure you all understand the price of betrayal." With that, he hit a button on his phone, and the air crackled with tension. A moment later, a video started playing on a nearby screen, no one knowing how it got there. Richard's heart leaped into his throat as he recognized the images. It was a video from that night, a moment he thought lost forever. It was chaotic and dark, but there, in the flickering images, was a glimpse of Letitia, her face twisted in anger, a confrontation unfolding. Richard's heart raced as the truth started surfacing around him, spiraling into chaos. "Maggie, stay close!" he yelled, desperately moving to shield her from the unveiling nightmare. The city around him roared with confusion. And then, the screen flickered one last time, revealing a man behind Letitia, someone Richard had never seen before, standing ominously in the shadows. The air hung heavy with dread as realization crashed down. Jack smirked, eyes glinting with triumph. "Welcome to the real story." As the crowd gasped, Richard's pulse quickened. The pieces were shifting. Everything he thought he understood was about to unravel. revealing depths of betrayal that could consume them all. The storm was only just beginning, and he wasn't sure if anyone could survive its wrath. The crowd gasped as Jack's words hung heavy in the air, a tempest brewing. Richard's heart raced, confusion and betrayal crashing together, swirling in a storm of emotions. The video played on, flickering images lighting up faces like a haunting memory. "Maggie, keep close," he shouted, instinctively pulling her behind him, shielding her from the chaos. Vivian knelt beside the injured man, tears spilling down her face. "I can't lose you again," she cried, her anguish resonating through the confusion. "Stop this!" Letitia's voice sliced through, tremors of panic creeping in. "None of this is real. You're all just trying to tear us apart." Yet doubt shimmered behind her eyes, a crack in her armor. But Jack's expression hardened, teeth gritting. "You think I'd come back if it were all just a game?" His voice thundered above the chaos. Slicing through fear, the tension was palpable, thick enough to choke on. Richard's gaze darted between Vivian and the bleeding man, then to Letitia, whose fury morphed into desperation. "Tell them the truth," Jack commanded, eyes glinting. "She's been weaving lies around you, Richard. Lies about everything!" And just like that, the air shifted. A searing pain suddenly exploded in the center of Richard's chest. He staggered back, clutching himself as if it could rid him of the horror. A blinding light erupted from his phone, the screen flickering ominously, illuminating the faces around him. He glanced down, horrified to see a notification. A photo sent to him in real time. It was a picture of Vivian, but this time she was bound, fear painted across her face, a menacing figure looming in the shadows behind her. "What the hell?" he gasped, the world spinning beneath his feet. Maggie squealed in terror, her small hands trembling. "No, make it stop!" She clutched Richard's arm, her eyes wide with horror. Jack smirked, a grim satisfaction in his expression. "Now, we're in the epicenter of truth. You really think I'd let her go? She's my leverage." Richard's blood turned to ice. "Your leverage?" he echoed, disbelief flooding through him. "What do you want with her?" Before Jack could respond, the homeless man on the ground surged forward, grasping for Richard's foot as if trying to project strength through pain. "You don't know what's coming," he rasped, voice strained. "She's not who you think. None of you are." The crowd murmured, fear lacing their voices, eyes darting from Jack to Vivian to Richard in confusion. "What do you mean?" Richard shot back. Suddenly, the air thickened, a shiver crawling up Richard's spine. A piercing shriek echoed from somewhere down the street. Sound sharper than glass. People froze. The chaos stopped. Richard felt it, to his core. Something was off. Something was very wrong. And then it happened. A van screeched around the corner, tires screaming against the pavement. Richard turned, eyes wide, instincts screaming. The door flung open. A figure lunged toward them, gun raised, a flash of metal glinting under the harsh city lights. "Get down!" Richard yelled, but time froze. The shot rang out, a deafening sound that shattered the air, echoing in Richard's ears. His heart dropped as Jack staggered back, eyes wide in disbelief, the shock playing across his face. Stumbling, he fell to the ground, blood oozing from his side. "No!" Vivian screamed, throwing herself toward him, cradling his head. The chaos erupted anew, faces shifting from horror to confusion. "Maggie, run!" Richard screamed, his voice breaking with urgency. But it was too late. The crowd surged, panic igniting as the reality of the moment etched itself, clear and terrifying. "Jack," Vivian cried, but her voice faded. Richard's world spun, unraveling, each heartbeat pulsing with the weight of betrayal, love, and confusion. Just when Richard thought he could grasp what was happening, a voice cut through, clear and shockingly familiar. "What have you done?" Letitia's voice trembled, revealing a truth that twisted deep within him. "Letitia?" Richard turned, but her face morphed in an instant. Her eyes darkened, cold and steely, as she cocked the gun she had discarded. "Now, let's see how deep this game goes," she said, voice calm, but laced with hatred. The ground fell from under Richard. The storm had arrived, and now it raged in every direction, leaving nothing but uncertainty in its wake. The crowd stood frozen, caught between fear and disbelief. Richard's heart pounded as he stared at Letitia, her weapon flickering in the city lights, casting shadows on her face. It felt like the air had been sucked out of his lungs. "Letitia," he breathed, desperation thickening his voice. "What's happening?" She stepped closer, her gaze darting between him and Jack, and that expression lingered, part anger, part panic. "You need to get away from them. They're lying to you." Or Jack was already on his knees, blood pooling around him, and Vivian was cradling him, her hands shaking. "Call an ambulance," she cried, her voice rising above the chaos. "We need help, now!" Richard's hands trembled, his heart racing. He didn't know if he wanted to run or stay. He felt the eyes of the crowd on him, their whispers simmering in the background, a collective judgment hanging heavy in the air. He glanced at Maggie, who was visibly shaking, clinging to his waist. "Please," she whimpered, "I want to go home." Just then, a blaring siren cut through the eerie tension, and the crowd started to shift, backing away from the unfolding chaos. It suddenly felt like a scene from a movie, unreal and jolting, as if he had stepped into someone else's nightmare. And then, out of nowhere, came a thunderous blast, a deafening sound that seemed to rip through the very fabric of the night. A shockwave hit them, sending people sprawling to the ground, screams erupting. Richard turned just in time to see a massive explosion engulf the alley behind them, flames reaching high, illuminating the dark city sky like a grotesque firework. "Get down!" Richard shouted, instinct kicking in. He pulled Maggie close and threw himself over her, heart racing with fear. The crowd scattered like leaves in a storm, every face a mask of horror. He heard the crackling of fire, felt the heat on his back, but amidst the chaos, a shadow emerged from the dust and debris, tall, broad-shouldered, striding through the smoke like a specter rising from the ashes. Richard squinted, catching glimpses of familiar features that jolted him. "Tom?" He gasped, disbelief riding on the edge of his voice. It was his brother, a figure thought lost to time and distance. "Richard!" Tom's voice boomed over the chaos, slicing through the screams. "You need to get out of here! Now! It's not safe!" "What do you mean?" Richard shouted back, confusion mingling with fear. Tom's expression hardened. I can't explain right now, but there are people here who want to finish what they started. Everything that happened years ago. It's all connected. Jack's form lay bleeding, and the sight twisted something deep within him. But we need to help him, Richard cried, pointing back toward the chaos. Vivian was still at Jack's side, desperation shining in her eyes. No. Tom's voice roared, cutting through the crowd's panic. Leave him! He's part of it! You can't trust any of them! What? Why? Richard's voice trembled, grappling with an urge to believe Tom. Suddenly, shock morphed into urgency. The flames behind them flickered, illuminating the deep shadows. And in that moment, a dreadful realization spread through the crowd. Richard turned, catching sight of Letitia, her eyes wide, her expression shifting as if she were unraveling before their eyes. In a heartbeat, everything changed. The fire blazed brighter, filling the night with an unnatural glow. Richard felt an electrical charge in the air, a takedown of every certainty he thought he knew. Tom, what are you not telling me? He pressed, raw panic etching his features. But as if in response, there was another voice cutting through the inferno, a voice that sent chills racing up Richard's spine. It's too late for that, Richard. A woman stepped into the light, her presence commanding. It was Sarah, his private investigator, standing firm before the flames. But she looked different, a wicked smile spreading across her face. Welcome to the game. Richard felt his knees weaken as the pieces began to fall into place. Images flashing through his mind, the connections morphing and shifting. The very fabric of his life was unraveling, and now he stood on the edge of an abyss he hadn't seen coming. Sarah? He whispered, disbelief flooding his voice. What game? Everything you thought you knew was a lie, she replied, a sinister glint in her eyes. Letitia wasn't the only player. There are bigger forces at work here, and it's time for you to decide where you stand. The ground beneath them shifted, and Richard felt the weight of the world pressing down. He had just stepped into the heart of a storm he couldn't escape, where every truth could dissolve, and every relationship was nothing but a mask. As the flames roared higher, he faced a reality that felt surreal, one filled with treachery, betrayal, and a past that refused to stay buried. Richard stood on the brink, knowing this was just the beginning. Everything was about to change, and he was terrified to see how deep the rabbit hole went. The flames danced higher, sending flickers of orange light across the crowd, illuminating panic-stricken faces. Richard felt trapped in a nightmare, each heartbeat echoing in his ears. The revelation from Sarah hung in the air like smoke, her grin twisted, eyes cold and calculating. Everything is connected, she said, voice steady. But Richard could see the thrill behind her eyes. It was as if she relished the chaos, the uncertainty. His stomach twisted. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from the alley, and before anyone could dodge, a second shockwave knocked him off his feet. The ground shook violently, sending people sprawling. Richard's world spun. He fought to stand, gasping for breath against the suffocating dust. Richard! Maggie's plea was a distant echo, lost in the growing uproar. He strained to find her in the confusion, fear clawing at his insides. It was all too much. Vivian held Jack's head, panic in her eyes, as she pressed her hands against his wound, blood oozing through her fingers. "Please, hold on!" she cried, desperation leaking into her voice. "Get him out of here!" Sarah yelled, stepping back. "He's no good to anyone!" "Stop!" Richard shouted, shoving his way through the chaos. "You can't do this!" But the crowd surged again, a wave of bodies crashing against him. Fear ignited something primal. He moved faster, elbows jabbing, looking for Maggie, feeling every pulse of danger. This was a city on fire, figuratively and literally. Then it happened. A brilliant flash ignited the smoke, blinding him momentarily. Richard clutched his eyes, heart hammering in his chest. When he regained his sight, everything changed. In front of him, a figure emerged, his silhouette cloaked in the remnants of the explosion's light. "Stop the game!" The voice was familiar. "Letitia?" Richard's heart dropped as she stepped into view, no longer the woman he thought he knew. Her posture screamed authority, yet behind it, something else lurked. "Richard," she began, but anger flickered in her voice. "I did what I had to." "Had to?" he fired back, rage boiling. "You shot a man. You manipulated us all." But she didn't falter. "You need to understand, Jack isn't who he claims to be. None of this is real." Jack groaned from the ground, struggling to draw breath. His eyes flicked to Letitia, filled with betrayal. "You think she's innocent? She's been pulling strings from the start." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, eyes darting. Richard's mind raced, everything fractured, spun out of control. "It's not her fault," Vivian shouted, desperation deepening her tone. "We were all caught in this." And then Letitia's expression shifted, her eyes narrowing with determination. "The truth is darker than all of you realize." She reached into her coat, and the crowd held their breath. Richard's heart pounded. He braced for anything. But what emerged was a flash drive, her voice ringing clear. "Everything you think you know, it's all in here." Before anyone could react, a loud crash silenced the scene, shattering the tension. From behind her, a shadow lurched forward, a hefty man, fists raised, rushing like a freight train. The moment stretched. Everything clicked. The crowd shrieked. Richard realized what had gone wrong. "No!" he yelled, lunging forward. But it was too late. The man barreled into Letitia, knocking her off her feet, the flash drive flying from her fingers. "Stop!" Richard screamed, but time slowed to a crawl as the man grasped the drive, and the world around them shifted. The air thickened with impending doom, hearts racing against the ticking clock. And then, as if time fractured, he pressed the button. The screen exploded to life, images flickering. The past, the betrayals, and faces he'd never wanted to see again. Each pulse of light exposed secrets he believed dead and buried. A cascade of truths spilled forth, lies told in whispers, deals made in darkness, and Richard's face frozen in shock, watching everything unravel. But it was the last image that stole his breath. A child, small and terrified, tied to a chair, glancing behind a door. "Maggie!" he gasped, the world crashing down around him as a horrifying realization settled. It was his daughter. Richard staggered back, mind reeling, relationships twisted beyond recognition. The revelation shattered the night. Chaos erupted anew, confusion morphing into terror. In that moment, Everything changed again, and he realized no one was safe. The storm wasn't just outside, it was embedded in their very secrets, and the waves were rising. The crowd recoiled as the screen illuminated the chaos around them. Richard stumbled back, heart pounding. His daughter was out there. "Raggy!" he shouted, voice cracking. Panic surged in his veins. He caught a glimpse of her, fear painted on her young face. Vivian clung to Jack, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We can't lose him. I can't lose him." She pressed her hands against his wound, begging for life to return. "Vivian!" Richard yelled, urgency surging through him. The heat of the flames mirrored the fire in his chest, igniting the determination within. "We need to get to Maggie." But even as he moved, the crowd pulsed around him. Faces twisted in shock, reality spiraling out of control. Letitia, her expression filled with disbelief, still held the remnants of her weapon, now just a weight in her hands. "You don't understand," she cried, panic rising. "I did this to protect you." "Protect me?" Richard fired back, fury in his tone. "You put us all in danger." Their argument simmered, fierce and raw. Blood spilled on the pavement, death creeping close with every heartbeat. The man who had lunged for Letitia now lay unconscious, a silhouette shadowed by the flames. The sirens wailed closer, a promise of chaos. Time slowed as Richard's pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out the screams. "I can't watch them die," Richard whispered, his heart aching. "Not again." He turned toward Maggie, eyes searching the shuddering mass. Panic swept through him. "I love you," he shouted into the fray. "Stay close to me." Maggie bobbed up and down, looking for a way through the wreckage, her small form lost among panic-stricken people. But just when hope seemed dim, a tight grip found his arm, a warm touch. "Maggie!" He turned, relief flooding through him as he pulled her close. "You're safe. I've got you." Then the world shifted again. A powerful explosion echoed through the night, flames reaching for the sky. Richard felt the heat wash over him, a suffocating blanket. He stumbled, dragging Maggie down with him. Through the smoke, Vivian's voice cut through. "Stay down!" She shielded Jack with everything she had, the weight of the moment breaking the air around them. "Get help!" Richard shouted over the chaos, voice raw. "We need to get him to a hospital." The crowd erupted again. People pushing, shoving, shouting. Richard's mind blurred, yet one thought remained clear. They had to escape. Their lives depended on it. "Come on," he urged, picking up Maggie. She gripped his neck, face buried against him. We moved together. Suddenly, the edges of the scene sharpened as lights flashed in the distance. The police arrived, officers rushing towards the commotion. Richard felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe they could end this nightmare. But as the officers approached, Letitia shot a warning gaze at Richard. "Don't trust them," she hissed. "Enough," Richard shouted, almost pleading. "Isn't it time for us to come together? This isn't just about us anymore." He held Maggie tightly, every inch of him radiating protection. And in that moment of stillness, a connection sparked. A thread of understanding intertwined among them. The police swarmed, but in the chaos, Richard caught Vivian's eye, a silent promise. In the ashes, there was a chance for rebirth. Nothing could shatter the bond they held, tied forever in tragedy. As the night settled, darkness couldn't hide the truth anymore. A reckoning was at hand, a storm that revealed their deepest fears, but also their greatest strength. Richard stood firm, breath shaky, but steady. "No more secrets! No more lies! Let's end this!" he declared, voice strong amidst the noise. "For our families, for the future!" They moved as one, determined to face whatever lay ahead. The storm within them burned brighter than the flames around. And as they took their first steps toward the unknown, Richard couldn't shake the feeling. They were going to need each other more than ever. If you don't want to miss out on what happens next, you must subscribe now. Smash that like button. Feed the algorithm so we can keep bringing you exclusive stories. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this wild ending. And don't wait 1 second longer to share this video with at least 5 friends. True fans understand how crucial it is to support the channel. We can't do this without you.